Welcome to Ubisoft, our series of keeping in contact with alumni. This is our second episode in the series, and our second guest is Emily Ip. Emily, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always great to come back to the department.
Yes, it's always great to see you again. Emily graduated in January, right? 2020?
Yes, yes.
So not so long ago. And she was a double major in linguistics with a concentration in language engineering, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And Spanish with a concentration in translation. And she also got the certificate in translation. She got an overall GPA of 4.0, I have to say that.
Thank you.
She was a recipient of two very prestigious scholarships within the department, which was the Conrad Schmidt Undergraduate Scholarship in 2016, I think.
It was 2018.
Oh, I thought 18 was the McVean Scholarship. I don't know, but you got
yeah.
And I think it was first the Conrad Schmidt and then the McVean Scholarship, which is more recent.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also remember you very, very, very active in our cultural activities. Organized by Sigma Delta Pi, by the department. I especially remember the Dia de las Escritoras, where you had a powerful rendering of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz reciting the hombres necios que acusáis a la mujer sin razón. I vividly remember that, your eloquence and your passion.
Yeah, right.
That text. So that is a little bit of your background. And I guess my first question for you is, honoring our title of Ubisoft, my first question for you is, where are you now?
All right, so as you mentioned, I graduated in January of 2020. And so after that, I had moved to the city to start an internship with a translation company called G3 Translate. And so the internship started off as normal in the office, but obviously our situation changed, and so that moved online. It was a virtual internship, and so I moved back home in New Jersey. And I was really lucky that the company decided to keep me on for the internship, and so I continued from January all throughout to September, and I was finally offered a full-time position. So it's been a lot of working in industry and kind of drawing upon all the stuff I learned in my undergrad to, becoming a project coordinator. But that's really what I've been up to.
Wow, congratulations on your position.
Thank you.
Program coordinator, right?
Yeah, project coordinator.
What do you do exactly? Can you tell us a little bit about that position?
Yeah, so our company is more so it's a team of project managers, project coordinators. We don't have in-house translators, so it's a lot of taking on projects from clients, usually in many languages, many markets, all related to market research, so like surveys and things like that. And so it's really taking in the content and projects from the clients and kind of doing a bit of like cultural consulting, seeing how, our backgrounds in the different countries, if applicable, will help to identify kind of what challenges are going on, and then, carrying out the project, assigning to translators and editors around the world, and in the end, delivering the translated product. So it's a lot of working with global teams and really coordinating with a bunch of other team members, some who are in other parts of the world, and also, owing a lot of our work to the translators and editors who are like the backbone of our company. So it's been so much fun because you learn so much about, like, not only, for me, it was great because we do have a lot of content going in and out with Spanish to like Spain or all the other countries in South America. But you also learn a lot about the other languages, the Asian languages, the Middle Eastern languages. And so it's like every day I'm surrounded by all these languages and talking to people in different parts of the world. So it's definitely been a great learning experience.
It sounds very exciting and fun too, as you said.
Yeah, very
So
much so.
I guess how well or how not well so much did prepare MSU for this type of job? What do you think was very important as your undergraduate education or
Mm. Right. So I would say that the translation program, I
Mhm.
think, really set me up to understand the being in the shoes of the translator. Like I said, I think the translators and the editors and the linguists are the backbone of our company. And so when you hand off projects to them, you have to make sure you inform them on the instructions, or like, debriefing them on what the assignment is. And when they come back with an issue, being in a place where you can understand what the issue is of the translator and then commuting that to the client. So I would say that all the translation competencies that we learned in the 4-course program helped me to understand how we can best serve our linguists, and then that in turn will obviously help us with our client relationships. And also what I mentioned about being surrounded by other languages is sometimes you're dealing with languages you don't know. And so I remember asking one of my colleagues who speaks Russian. I was looking over a translation and I asked him a question about it and if it looked right and if it was translated okay. And he said, oh yeah, they just used like a modulation here. So basically that. And I was like, oh wait, that's something we talked about, something we learned. And so it helps you to not only talk to, the people who are working for you, but like the people working with you. Because I would say, well, if you're looking to work in other translation companies, right, or the people you're working with, most likely they have also been studying languages. And so being able to talk about those fundamental translation concepts, I think it all really, it helped a lot.
something that you don't realize maybe how useful they are gonna be when you are at the workforce in the real world,
Mm-hmm.
working as a translator. But then after that, you say that you mentioned modulation, you have to apply this cultural adaptation, and then you say, oh, wait a moment, I learned that in theory and practice of translation. And at the moment,
Yeah,
I remember that students complained that they was like, oh my God, this is so difficult. This is a headache. I don't know how can I differentiate modulation from transposition? And now that
yeah,
you
no,
say
yeah.
that, I'm glad that maybe more students are going to be more motivated to study those theoretical
Yeah.
fundamental.
Oh, for sure. I remember a text that I did in your class for it was a tourism piece, and I forgot to change the measurement from miles to kilometers. And to me at the time, I didn't think it was an issue, and it was hard for me to understand like this, like how specific you had to be to change that. But now, obviously working in all these other markets and languages that don't use miles or inches, you have to adapt it to like kilometers and stuff. So that was a very specific example that one day I was like, oh yeah, like you have to pay attention to all the currency and the measurements and all that stuff. So all the details are very important.
Nice. You mentioned also the importance of culture, especially if you're working in a global environment. How important, how relevant is culture, and how relevant were your cultural classes or your classes other than translation? I guess that you took literature courses, culture courses,
Mm-hmm.
and what role do they have now if they have some?
Right. I think being aware of those like little cultural things, like I mentioned, it helps to kind of like when you're looking over the content of that the client has sent you, you have to be aware that is this culturally appropriate or culturally sensitive to that market. Like, should I include this in the translation in scope? So, for example, um, for example, in the United States, there's a huge mix of ethnicities. And usually when you're looking at a survey, that it asks you, oh, like, what ethnicity are you? But if you are translating, say, for a different market, like in maybe South America or in Europe, it's not likely you would ask the ethnicity question, right? So I think having taken the cultural classes was for me a really really valuable thing, because me personally, I come from a different ethnic background. I come from an Asian background, and also this Chinese American mix. And so for me, the cultural classes I took helped to inform my Spanish learning skills. And I think that all of that leads to me being able to now be in industry, look at the files and look at the content, and maybe best inform our clients as to what is culturally sensitive to ask, maybe what exists in the cultural market, maybe what doesn't. So yeah, I would say that.
And also, I was thinking Spanish in the US. Spanish in the US, Spanish from Spain. Spanish is spoken in 23 countries in the world. Mm-hmm. And cultural components are essential in translation as well, depending on your target audience. We have discussed that in class. It's not the same to translate something for Spain, that for Mexico, for Argentina, or Chile, or even for the US.
Right.
So can you give us some examples of situations where you have thought about what challenges Spanish as a language that is spoken all over the world? And maybe because you have classmates when you were at MSU from Colombia, mm-hmm. from Chile, from Spain. How rich was that mix?
Oh, it was awesome. I think in the Intro to Hispanic Linguistics class I had alone there, we had a mix of, I believe it was Ecuadorian people, Argentinian, Colombian, and a classmate from Venezuela. So it was very cool, especially on topics as in like food or clothes and stuff. And I also remember I was working with a survey the other day that was being translated for Spanish in the US, mm-hmm. Argentina, Mexico, Peru, and Colombia. And it was challenging because when they start listing food options or maybe stores or something, you have to be sensitive to maybe what words are appropriate in their country that maybe aren't so appropriate in another country, so as not to obviously, offend or say the wrong language. And I would say that even translated to interpreting. I also completed the New York State Unified Court System interpreting internship, and that was basically like translation, but like right on the fly. And I got to observe a lot of staff interpreters who, once the person comes into court and they realize like what country they're from. I believe we were interpreting for a person from the Dominican Republic, and they tried saying a household item. I think it was like something like in the bathroom or something, and they tried interpreting for this person, and they tried the word like toilet, and they didn't know that word in, I think they're Dominican Spanish, so he had to try a couple different words, and then in the end he just ended up saying toilet in English, and he understood. Like, it was, you have to be sensitive to like what types of words they might know, might not know, or if they're using, Spanish in the US, they might just use English words. So being able to like understand like all the different markets and what they use in their cultures, I think is really important to not only translation, but interpreting as well.
That's right. I have forgotten about the internship and the course system. So I'm thinking now that you have touched so many different subfields within until you land in G3 Translate or who knows where more. But for example, the linguistics, the judiciary, translation, a little bit of interpreting. Mm-hmm. I think that you did a research project in the Hispanic linguistic class with Dr. Estrom?
Yeah, I did. I did a project in her class, and what ended up happening was that I realized I loved research so much too, because I think the research informed a lot of how we learn language, and maybe how you might understand language in terms of like when you go to translator. And so I ended up starting a research project with Dr. Ashram outside of class, and it was so exciting because I also got to use that when I traveled abroad to Spain,
Right.
and got to collect data and stuff. And so yeah, I did touch upon like translation and interpreting, and I realized that I love doing research as well, and that was also a really, really fun part of my undergrad. So I mean, I think language is something that, you know, it pervades everything, right? It's the way we communicate it, and you could really do anything and everything with it, I think. And so yeah, I was really grateful that I had so many opportunities in the Spanish department, whether it was taking translation classes with you or being able to do that interpreting in New York City, or, you know, work with Dr. Esstrom. So I really got to explore a lot of different.
I think it's very important that you had such an active role in everything: cultural activities, internships, you study abroad in Spain, your classes. And I think that this job was a consequence of an email that I sent to you about a Glassdoor position or something. I don't know if this was the one or not, but I remember that I sent an email to the class and you said, oh yeah, I applied for that already or something like that. So that gave me the impression that you were already on top of things that were relevant to translation world and the language industry.
Yes, because I think, and this is for anyone who is you know, unsure or like undeciding of what they want to do when they come into university, is that I think language is an amazing thing that can be applied to a lot of different sectors, whether if you're interested in like language and healthcare, or like language and computers, or language and teaching and stuff. That our country now is so diverse, and there's so many different communities that you can serve through language. And so I think that was the exciting part for me, that once I got involved in the Spanish department and started doing all these things, it was kind of just like a consequence of seeing how much you can do, and just searching at like what career opportunities there were for it. So yeah, I do remember that I had applied for that position. I think it was also with TransPerfect. G3 Translate is now part of TransPerfect. It's their market research hub, we'd like to say. So it all worked out.
It all fit out nicely, yeah. One thing about the research, I mean, research is such a fundamental part of the work of a translator. In translation as a process. I remember in classes that I emphasized the aspect of translation not only as a product, but as a process. And it's such an amazing thing that you are enjoying so much, and that you enjoy as an undergraduate student, the research, and now you have the possibility of doing. Because one of the most rewarding things in translation, I think, is how much you learn through reading and through doing research about any different topic. And the thing that you say about language and other fields, I mean, we need so many experts in all the fields, in health, in law, in science, that I think, and we are trying to emphasize the importance of double majors, such as you, linguistics and Spanish, or communication and Spanish, or justice studies and Spanish, because we need experts in the language and the discipline in so many fields.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think for example, a person who might be interested in serving the community, and maybe in a more clinical sense for example, you could do like speech language pathology, and that way you're not only helping, say, I mean, if you're bilingual, then you're not only serving the English speaking community, but also the Spanish speaking community. And I think that with the way our world is evolving now, there are so many language needs that I think need to be met in the States. I think in Europe, it's kind of like you don't have a second thought about, oh, like there's so many languages going on, there's so much translation going on. And I think that in the US, maybe some people don't realize how important it is to have those extra language abilities, because there's not only English and Spanish going on, there's Chinese, there's Hindi, there's Russian, and I think that if you're interested in other subfields, then learning a second language will be an absolute asset in whatever you're doing.
Especially in the area of New York where you are, and New Jersey, I think it's key.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. This pandemic has forced us to work remotely, to be more technologically savvy. And some of my students are complaining because, of course, they miss the interaction, the face-to-face interaction. I do miss that too. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I try to let them know that this is actually very good for them as future translators. Because translation is something, as you said, in your company, most of the people are working not in-house. They are working as freelance translator or for the company, but at home. Mm-hmm. So I think that this is actually very helpful for them to be trained in this online teaching. Right. They have to develop another set of abilities that maybe 1 year ago they didn't have. Mm-hmm. And now they are forced to learn more software on their own, or see more tutorials, or watch more videos about how this translation tool works, because we cannot go to the translation lab. Mm-hmm. So I think this is actually an opportunity. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I think for me, translating was always something I did best without distractions and being able to find all the resources on my own. I remember just trying to, because I remember I started your that translation sequence in the program when I was in a place where I wasn't super comfortable with Spanish yet. I felt like I was learning Spanish as I was taking the translation. And so a lot of doing the assignments, doing the hard work was sitting down, was maybe watching, if it was like a translation for a recipe, maybe you'd have to watch a YouTube video on someone cooking the dish, or it was maybe sitting down in the library and looking at a glossary, or maybe reaching out to somebody in a different country, but like obviously you can't, it's not as easy to just pick up the phone and call them, and so maybe that is something you have to do virtually. And that specifically is something that you have to, I think is a competency that is very important now, that being able to communicate online in a very timely manner, I think is also a competency for translators, mm-hmm. being very timely with your assignments, understanding the debriefing, and being able to communicate clearly over email and stuff like that. I think that wasn't really something you think about when you're just learning the art of translating in classes. In classes, you're really just trying to get down the fundamental stuff really well. But once you become a translator in the industry, like you said, like there'll be people working from home, or maybe your editor is going to be halfway around the world, depending on, where everyone lives. And so being able to, receive assignments and understand them and even accept them in a timely manner, I think that's something that today's students in the coronavirus world can learn, even in a virtual environment.
Yeah, very interesting. Two things that you said that I would like to emphasize. First of all, the importance of reading instructions carefully. This is precisely something that I was teaching today in my theory and practice of translation. Like a student didn't read the assignment, and I said, well, imagine this is a client and you are submitting your work completely different from what they ask you. They're not gonna call you ever again. You have first thing that you have to do is read the assignment, read the instructions, read the translation brief. What does my client want from me? So this is another stage in the pandemic world that it's forcing us to pay more attention. I mean, eventually translation is about detail and it's about paying attention, but pay attention from the very beginning to the instructions. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And I hope that when they watch the program, they say, yes, Dr. Garcia Vizcaino emphasizes the importance of reading carefully. Yeah. And the second thing is that translation, I think it's a way to improve a foreign language. I remember the textbook that we used to have, En Otras Palabras, and the subtitle of the textbook was Perfeccionamiento del Español a través de la traducción. So translation forces you, again, because you pay attention to details, to the subtleties of the language, that adjective, and maybe I don't know the meaning of the adjective, and I go to the dictionary, and then I learn. So it's a way, so when you are saying that you felt that you were learning Spanish at the same time that you were doing your translation classes, I think that's not so bad, right? I mean, of course, the language has to be the tool, but sometimes you have to learn both at the same time, or maybe the translation is going to be a tool precisely to get your proficiency in the language.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's a great way to also learn the types of like cultural knowledge that you might need. Like I remember the first unit in that book was jokes. And I had a lot of trouble with that exercise because there was, I think, cultural groundwork that hadn't been laid yet. But because we were able to go through it in class with both, we have both English speakers and Spanish speakers. I think that type of collaboration when you're trying to learn translation is most helpful, because not only can you come up with a translation, but you can ask the native speakers while they're there, does this make sense? And yeah, also, although I was very nervous to take translation, even though I felt I hadn't, I didn't think I was good enough at Spanish. I think I would argue that it was even more helpful because I got to know more about English myself, like through the process. So it was a very fun and interesting way to learn about both languages.
And of course, you were responsible enough to realize I have to go abroad. I have to go to a Spanish speaking country. I remember that decision-making process and academic advising with you and talking about your desire. I think you were very nervous at the very beginning. And then you were like, you didn't want to come back to the US.
Yeah, I would say so. So before I went abroad, I was like, I think I'm okay at Spanish. I think I'm pretty good. Like I can, communicate with the people in my classes and do the assignments. But oh my gosh, going to another country where it's just like all you hear, it's all they speak, is a whole other experience. And that I think that completely transformed my Spanish skills and the confidence I held when speaking Spanish, and I think my interest in just trying to learn about the other culture. And I worked so hard to come back with the Spanish accent, so that was also very fun too, using that as a tool to connect with my classmates there. Can you teach me more about this cultural thing, or how do you make that sound with your accent? But
well, I have to say that Emily was at the Universidad de Salamanca. It was for 1 semester or for 1 year?
1 semester.
1 semester, and you were taking translation classes actually, right?
I was.
And also translation classes in Spain. And when you came back, it was like you were from Spain. I mean, your accent was so peninsular Spanish. I was amazed.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm so flattered. But and that was a super fun part of it, like taking translation classes abroad, because I was the only American in the classroom. And so they were translating from English into Spanish, which was very, very difficult, but I think the types of like translation techniques in our classes helped in that regard. But they would always call on me to like, can you read this English passage since you're a native speaker? So that was fun. And obviously, when we got together in like groups to try to understand the source text and then translate it into Spanish, I think I was able to kind of decipher a little bit of that, and it made the experience in the classroom at the university with Spaniards so much more fun and rewarding.
I'm so glad to hear that. Emily, I think just to finish, I would ask you if you have some piece of advice, not only to students in the translation program that are currently in the translation program, but maybe prospective students or someone who is undecided, someone who is interested about in learning a new language, learning Spanish. What advice could you give these prospective students or these current students as well?
So I do want to offer some advice specifically to the translation students. I think, and this kind of ties back to us now moving towards more virtual world, is that translation now these days is done so much through software and virtually and stuff like that. And so I think, while you're going through your studies and you're learning all the foundational translation techniques, that you also learn about some computer-assisted translation tools, the CAT tools. So like the popular ones being like MemoQ and SLD's Studio and WordFast. I think, because I think now we're moving away from translation being a pencil and paper type of thing, and it's now more about, can you do it with accuracy, and can you do it with the tools that we have, like meaning in industry. And I think that learning a bit about how to use those CAT tools are going to be so essential to a translator in the industry that we are in now. And I think for prospective language students, I think that if you are at least a little interested, I think you should at least take some classes, right? Take some classes, see how you like it. It will only benefit you as a student, as a person in now our cultural community and the country that we're in, and you as a sort of a person with more international experience, right? I think companies now are starting to value people with, at least some knowledge of international culture or a background, and someone who can have that global perspective in, in their company. So if you're looking to use it for professional use, I think learning languages will definitely take you far. But also, if you're interested in diving a little deeper, there's so much to explore, right? I think we talked about translation, like language in translation, interpreting. Maybe if you're more of an academic, you can do research, or if you're more into teaching, or being a speech language pathologist. Really, there's all these possibilities now with language, and I would strongly encourage you to at least take one class and then see where you can go from there.
Nice. I love to see you so enthusiastic and with such motivation. I can tell, I am sure everybody will tell that you love what you do. And I think the translation is a very rewarding experience at so many levels. Mm-hmm. And people can tell that throughout your words and the way you explain your work and your experience. So thank you so much, Emily.
Oh, you're so welcome.
It has been so nice talking to you. And I hope that we can keep in touch. And best of luck in your position.
Thank you so much. I always enjoy coming back and sharing a bit of my experience, even if it can help just one person decide what they can do. Because as we said, the language and translation are very rewarding. So I hope more students can.
That would be great. And if you know about some internship opportunities, if G3 Translate is looking for students into the area, you know where you can contact.
Oh, yes, for sure. We'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you.
Chao.
Chao, saludos.
Saludos, guapa.